Think your bike is done at 40,000 miles? That the engine's basically on borrowed time once the odometer hits 5 digits? I've got news for you. You're wrong. And that assumption is exactly why so many riders end up trading in a bike with a tired engine that actually had another 60,000 miles left in it. Here's what most riders don't realize. There are bikes out there. Goldwings, Harleys, Japanese standards, doesn't matter the brand. Sitting at 150,000, 200,000 miles, running as strong as the day they left the showroom. Meanwhile, the guy 2 garages down is rebuilding a top end at 35,000 miles, wondering what went wrong. The difference isn't luck. It isn't some magic bike that got a golden build off the factory line. It comes down to 10 specific habits that maybe 1 in 5 riders actually follow. And I'm not talking about check your oil level advice you already know. I'm talking about the stuff that separates bikes rotting in a used lot at 40,000 miles from bikes still ripping past 100,000 without ever seeing the inside of a rebuild shop. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a lot of work. This sounds expensive. I don't have a heated garage and a full tool chest. But here's the truth. Most of what I'm about to walk you through takes less time than washing your bike and costs less than a tank of gas. Today, I'm giving you all 10 habits in order. And if you stay with me to the end, I'm going to tell you about the one habit almost nobody does that's responsible for more blown engines than everything else on this list combined. It takes about 30 seconds and it's completely free. So grab whatever you're drinking and let's talk about keeping your bike alive well past the point most people give up on it. Step 1. Stop trusting the manual's oil interval. Let's start with the one everyone thinks they've already got handled. Oil changes. Except here's where riders get it wrong, and it's the #1 reason engines fail before 60,000 miles. Your owner's manual probably gives you 2 numbers, not 1, a normal interval and a shorter severe service interval buried a few pages later. Most riders read the big number, assume it applies to them, and never check which schedule actually fits how they ride. That's the real mistake here. It's not that the manual is wrong, it's that almost nobody checks which column applies to them. If you're doing short stop-and-go commutes, riding in heat, riding in dust, or letting your bike sit for weeks between rides, that's severe service. And that longer interval printed in big letters on the first page isn't the one you should be following. Short trips are the real killer here. The engine never gets fully up to operating temp, moisture and fuel condensation build up in the oil, and it turns into a sludgy, acidic mess that eats bearings and cam lobes from the inside. The rule that keeps bikes running past 100,000 miles, check which service schedule actually applies to your riding. And if you're doing mixed or short trip riding, change your oil every 3,000 miles and always change the filter with it. Never just top off. A dirty filter in fresh oil is like pouring clean water into a dirty cup. This costs you maybe $30 to $50 in supplies and 20 minutes of your time. Compare that to a $2,500 top-end rebuild, and it's the cheapest insurance you'll ever buy. But oil is just the start. There's another fluid almost nobody thinks about until they're stuck picking gravel out of a slide. Step 2. The chain and sprocket ritual. Nobody actually does right. If you're riding a chain drive bike, this is the single most neglected maintenance item on 2 wheels. Everybody knows they're supposed to lube their chain. Almost nobody does it correctly. Here's the problem. Most riders spray lube on a dry, dirty chain right before a ride. That does almost nothing. You're just trapping grit and grime against your sprockets, and that grit acts like sandpaper on every link. The real sequence: clean the chain first with a dedicated chain cleaner or kerosene, let it dry, then lube it. And do this after a ride when the chain is warm, not before. So the lube actually penetrates the links instead of flinging off in the first 5 miles. Do this every 500 to 600 miles and check chain slack every fill-up. A neglected chain doesn't just snap, it slowly murders your front and rear sprockets. And by the time you notice, you're replacing all 3 for $200 to $400 instead of a $15 bottle of chain lube and 15 minutes with a rag. Now, while we're talking about drivetrain neglect, there's a fluid that gets ignored even harder than your chain. Step 3. coolant isn't set and forget. If your bike is liquid cooled, listen closely because this one sneaks up on people. Coolant doesn't just evaporate or run out, it breaks down chemically over time and turns corrosive. When that happens, it starts eating away at your water pump seals, your radiator, your head gasket. You won't see it coming until you're leaking coolant on the side of the road or watching your temp gauge climb on a summer ride. 2 years or 24,000 miles is a solid default, but check your bike's spec. Some manufacturers and some long-life coolant formulas are rated for 3 years or more. So don't just guess. Whatever your interval is, don't wait for it to hit the lifetime mark some marketing likes to throw around. And while you've got it drained, inspect your water pump weep hole for any sign of leakage. Catching a failing water pump seal early is a $40 part. Catching it late is a $600 repair after it's already taken out your clutch, which sits right next to it on most bikes. But even perfect fluids won't save you if you ignore one part that quietly strangles your engine's breathing. Step 4. The air filter fuel economy thief. Your air filter is doing one job, keeping dirt, bugs, and road grime out of your engine. When it's clean, your bike breathes easy. When it's clogged, your engine is working overtime for every mile. Riders go years without checking this thing. It goes from white or tan to black, and they wonder why their fuel economy dropped and their throttle feels sluggish. Pull it every 6,000 miles and check it. If you've got a standard paper filter, hold it up to a light. If you can't see light through it, it's done. If you're running a foam or oiled cotton filter, like the reusable K and N style filters, that light test won't tell you anything since they're not meant to be see-through. For those, follow the manufacturer's clean and re-oil interval instead. Either way, a fresh or properly serviced filter runs $15 to $30 and can restore lost mid-range power and a noticeable bump in fuel economy. Speaking of things that quietly kill performance, there's a component most riders assume is bulletproof until it grenades on the highway. Step 5. Valve clearance checks. Quick note before this one. This doesn't apply to every bike, so don't panic if you're not sure what valve train your engine has. Plenty of motorcycles, including most Harley-Davidson V-twins and other bikes with hydraulic valve lifters or hydraulic adjusters, are self-adjusting. The system takes up clearance automatically and never needs a manual check. If that's your bike, you can skip this one entirely. This applies to bikes with mechanical valve trains, shim under bucket or screw and lock nut adjusters, which is common on a lot of Japanese standards and sport bikes and on some gold wings depending on the generation. If you're not sure which your bike has, a quick search of your model or a look in the manual will tell you. For those bikes, valve clearances drift over time as things wear in. When they get too tight, valves can't seal properly against the seat and you get burnt valves. When they get too loose, you get noisy, inefficient operation and accelerated wear on the valve train. Most manufacturers recommend checking this every 12,000 to 16,000 miles. Most riders never do it once in the bike's life. Yes, this one might need a shop visit if you're not comfortable pulling valve covers and using feeler gauges yourself. And yes, it'll cost you $150 to $300 depending on your bike. But compare that to what happens when a valve clearance issue goes unchecked for 50,000 miles. You're looking at a $2,000 plus valve job, or worse, a bent valve meeting a piston. This is the maintenance item people delay the longest and regret ignoring the most. Quick pause. If you've been enjoying the video so far, we would really appreciate it if you subscribe to our channel as it helps us to grow. All right, back to it. Step 6. Fork oil and seals. Not just a comfort thing. Most riders think of fork oil as a ride quality issue. Soft, mushy front end, no big deal, right? Wrong. Degraded fork oil doesn't just ruin your ride comfort, it means your front end isn't controlling weight transfer properly under braking, which affects your actual stopping distance and stability. Fork oil breaks down and picks up moisture over time, just like every other fluid on this list. Swap it every 12,000 to 15,000 miles and inspect your fork seals for weeping while you're in there. A leaking seal will contaminate your brake rotor if it's a front fork setup with the caliper nearby. Fork oil and seals run about $30 to $60 in parts if you're doing it yourself. A full fork rebuild after seals fail and oil contaminates your brakes can run $300 to $500. Now let's talk about a system most riders think is maintenance-free until it fails catastrophically. Step 7. Brake fluid actually expires. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the air over time, even in a sealed system. When it does, its boiling point drops. That means under hard or sustained braking, think a mountain descent or emergency stop, your brake fluid can start to boil, and you get a spongy lever with no bite right when you need it most. Riders change their brake pads religiously and then never think about the fluid feeding the whole system. Flush and replace your brake fluid every 2 years, regardless of mileage. It's a $10 bottle of fluid and maybe 20 minutes per end if you know how to bleed brakes, or $60 to $80 at a shop. Compare that to what happens if your brakes fade going into a corner. That's not a repair bill. That's a hospital bill. Step 8. Battery terminals. The silent stranding. Here's one of the most preventable roadside failures out there. Rider's bike won't turn over. They're sure it's a dead battery. 9 times out of 10, corroded terminals choking the connection. Every few months, disconnect the negative terminal first, then positive. Clean both terminals and connector ends with a wire brush and a baking soda and water mix. Dry it off, coat the terminals with a thin layer of dielectric grease, and reconnect positive first, then negative. 5 minutes of work a few times a year, and you'll never pay for a tow because your bike wouldn't start in a parking lot. Step 9. Tire pressure isn't just about grip. Everybody knows underinflated tires feel sketchy in corners. What most riders don't realize is that incorrect tire pressure also destroys tires unevenly and puts extra strain on your wheel bearings and suspension components from the abnormal flex. Check pressure cold before you ride at least every 2 weeks. Tires lose pressure naturally over time, even with no puncture. Riding on a tire that's 5 to 8 psi low doesn't just wear the edges prematurely, it generates extra heat that can lead to a blowout at speed. This costs you nothing but 2 minutes with a gauge you can buy for $10. Compare that to a tire that wears out 30% faster than it should, or worse, fails on the highway. Step 10. Storage prep, where most engine damage actually happens. Here's the one nobody thinks about because it happens when the bike isn't even running. If your bike sits for more than a month, winter storage, a busy season, whatever the reason, improper storage causes more long-term internal damage than most riders realize. Fuel breaks down and gums up injectors or carb jets. Moisture condenses inside the engine and exhaust, leading to internal corrosion. Tires develop flat spots, batteries drain, and sulfate. Before any storage over 30 days, run a fuel stabilizer through a full tank, change the oil so contaminated oil isn't sitting on internal components for months, disconnect the battery or put it on a tender, and get the bike up on a stand if you can to take weight off the tires. This is maybe 30 minutes of prep and $15 in fuel stabilizer. Skip it, and you could be looking at a carb rebuild, an exhaust replacement from internal rust, or a battery replacement. Easily $300 to $600 in damage from a bike that never even left the garage. And here's the one. Habit. Almost nobody does. I promised you the one that causes more engine damage than anything else on this list. And here it is. Cold start habits. And I want to correct something a lot of riders still believe, because it's genuinely outdated advice that can work against you. The old rule was let it idle for a minute or two before you ride. That made sense on a carbureted bike running a rich, unmanaged cold start mixture. It does not hold up the same way on a modern fuel-injected engine. Here's why. Your oil pressure builds and starts circulating within the first 15 to 30 seconds of startup. That's really all the idle time you need before moving. Beyond that, sitting there idling on a cold engine isn't doing you any favors. A cold engine still runs a richer mixture for a short period after startup, and extended idling in that state can actually wash oil off your cylinder walls, which is the opposite of what you want. So flip the old advice on its head. Brief idle, then gentle riding. Not extended idle. Let the bike idle for 15 to 30 seconds, just long enough for oil pressure to come up and circulate, then get moving at low RPM and take it easy on the throttle for the first mile or two while everything comes up to temperature. That gentle riding period does more to properly warm the engine evenly than sitting still ever will. Do this every single time you start your bike, and you eliminate one of the biggest contributors to premature cam and bearing wear. The kind of wear that quietly accumulates for years and then shows up as a rebuild at 45,000 miles instead of a clean running engine at 100,000 plus. Wrapping it up. Look, here's the bottom line. A well-built motorcycle is capable of running well past 100,000 miles without ever seeing the inside of a rebuild shop. These are engineered, reliable machines when they're actually cared for properly. But even the best engineering in the world can't outrun neglect. Follow these 10 habits. Don't skip the boring ones because they seem too simple to matter. That $30 you save skipping an oil change today is a $2,500 rebuild bill waiting for you down the road. Take care of your bike and it'll take you further than you ever expected. Reliably, mile after mile, year after year. And if this helped you out, if there's even one habit on this list you're going to start doing differently, hit subscribe. I'm putting out real maintenance breakdowns every week. No fluff, no upsells, just what actually keeps these machines running. Thanks for riding along, and I'll see you in the next one.